Hello and welcome to those who are trickling into the chat. So pleased that you could join us for another installment of our Parent Like a Pro Summit. Okay, I'll jump in. Again, so appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. Love, engaging in this conversation whenever possible. It is one that is extremely meaningful to me. We have an amazing group of panelists this evening. We'll allow everyone to introduce themselves, but first wanted to just mention that there will be a giveaway happening tonight, this evening in the chat. So please check those details. Our moderator will be dropping the information in the chat. We'll be giving away our brand new product that launched middle point of last year. It's our Nanit Sound and Light Machine. It's a 3-in-1 device, very different from other products that are on the market. We're super proud of it. It's a really, really good one, no matter where you are in the parenting journey. Great for, sound machine and soothing types of features if you're a parent of a newborn or an infant. And then, of course, I'm still using it. I have a 3.5, almost 4-year-old, and she's super resistant to bedtime these days. And so I'm using it as a way to give her level of independence, giving her a lot of choices with color, sound, and things each night. So it's a product that we're loving, and giving that away to a lucky winner at the end of this session. So please check those details. Um, we'll start with introductions, and I can start and then pass it over. My name is Quinn. I oversee brand marketing here at Nanit. So, grateful to be part of such an amazing company where our mission is really to transform the future of parenting and family wellness, starting with the smartest baby monitor and parenting app in the world. Lauren, I know you're a user, and we are so proud of that, and so grateful for those who might be joining us this evening who are also fans of the product. If you're still, unsure, curious, check us out. Super proud of being at a company where we have the best in technology in terms of parenting tools, but also the type of company that can bring you these types of conversations like the one we'll have this evening, as a way to support our parents regardless of where they are in their parenting journey. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lauren and Logan to introduce themselves.
Hi, thanks for having us, Quinn. I'm Lauren Burson. I'm thrilled to be here. I was getting jealous of the giveaway because I think we need an upgrade of our Nanit. It is like the only product and app I've used every day for over 5 years. So
Amazing.
congrats on that. I am Lauren Burson. I'm the founder and CEO of Conceive. I spent the last 20 years building products and communities, mostly in the tech world. I spent time in small startups, big companies, in venture capital, really on the front lines, seeing what was being built in digital health. And that collided with my own very long and painful, or our own very long and painful infertility journey. And I realized I had to create the change that I wished I had. I'll tell you more about Conceive tonight, but really we are the first always on connected care layer for fertility and pregnancy. We do two things: 24/7 texting with nurses and coaches. So we have folks who can help with really any question from the simple to the complicated. And we really go deep on the emotional support side, because what's often so challenging about trying to conceive is the lack of control and the stress. Uh,
Yeah.
I essentially created the solution I wish I had. On top of that, we offer curated community groups for our members to really connect based on where they're at in the journey. So it's a really safe space. And thrilled to be here. Logan?
Logan Sugarman, significant other of Lauren, and also a longtime frequent user of Nanit. I feel like it has saved a number of nights by being able to dial in on the phone and maybe have too much information on what your child is doing. But we've also had some very funny experiences where Elle had her first sleepover with a friend, and the Nanit captured all of their little conversations at 5
Oh, I
as they were
love
plotting
that.
to go steal pizza and eat marshmallows while everyone was asleep. And
It was amazing.
there's some really good video evidence of them conspiring at 5 years old on their
Yeah,
to
they're
do some
5.
very, very funny stuff. So uh, nice little moments to capture and to have
Amazing.
for
Love to
everyone.
hear it. I'm curious, did you discover the product first, or which one of you did?
I would imagine me. I
Mm.
think that, like many, I was trying to just like compile the products that people said I had to have. And Nanit was top of the list. And so we had it.
Awesome.
Yeah, the memories and all the things, it's kind of wild being 5 years in with it.
Yeah.
I think to your point, the technology of it was so, I mean, this is also 5 years ago, was so kind of ahead of its time and useful from a, I mean, my friends who had kids before us, they had like the little pocket thing you had to
Right.
carry around. I mean, to
Black
have
and white.
an app-based system that you can kind of have everywhere and grant access to grandparents and
Right.
other folks that you want to be able to enjoy, I don't know, watching kids sleep is I guess a little weird, but oddly fulfilling and as a parent or a grandparent, like, something that you don't want to miss out on either. So having that
Absolutely.
access and accessibility was really cool.
I love that it's a product that both dads and moms can enjoy in different ways and at the same time. So really proud of that fact too. Tarana, hand it over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm Taryn Nazem. I'm one of many physicians at a reproductive infertility practice. It's called RMA of New York. I'm based here in New York City. I've been practicing for many years, doing all things fertility and infertility related. But my other hat is that I work with Lauren at Conceive. I was her first medical advisor and was so impressed with the product she was creating and felt just such a need for it in the community, and couldn't give up the opportunity to participate in what I think is really special. And she'll tell you a lot about it. And hopefully it'll create an opportunity of support for all of you. I also am a Nanit user, a later adopter, though. I have like a 5.5-year-old and 2.5-year-old. And for my son, I don't think I did good enough research, or it was like really novel and not really hot yet. And I missed the boat. But for my daughter, I have used it and I love it so much so that I travel with it, and it is a game changer in that it gives me freedom to do things when we travel, so that the kids are safe and I can have some fun and unwind, which is like amazing liberty. And because it's all like internet operated, you don't have to worry about the distance that you can cover. You can cover it across state lines. So not that I'm leaving my kids in the other state. But anyway, I feel this is the cross section of my whole entire life as a parent, as a physician, as a patient advocate. Like, we're really here to support in all the different arenas that I feel I flex in. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Amazing. And so with that, I would love to stay on you for a second, just to sort of debunk some misconceptions about infertility and the road to IVF and to becoming a parent. What do you hear most often when your patients come to you for assistance?
Oh my goodness, what don't I hear? It's anything that anyone has thought of has come up in my office. I'll start with some just facts and misconceptions. I'd say that infertility is quite common. And it's not that it's become that more people are infertile now than they were before, but they're just talking about it more. And there are still a lot of people who are very private. And so I just want to start there, which is that this is common. And so if something going on with you, it's something that's probably going on with a lot of people that you know. We see 1 in 6 couples experience infertility, and that's remarkable. The second thing I'll say is that there is a huge misunderstanding that there's a one-sided condition. And so a lot of people think that only women walk in my office, but actually men do too. This is equal parts shared condition, and infertility takes two to tango, right? So it's a equal problem. And that, and I'm sure Lauren will touch on this, and Logan too, that doing everything from the get-go to evaluate the entire couple and think beyond just the here and now, but what's the bigger vision for your family all in up front is extremely important. And I think it's something that is misunderstood. So the first big misconception is it's all female related. It is not. It is male and female. And the second is that you may walk into my office when you're just starting to try to create your family and you want to only focus on your first kid. But actually, it's very important for us to talk about more than just your first kid and where you want your dream family to end. And I'd be a very bad fertility doctor if I didn't take all that into account. And so I think that's the other piece. And then the third piece is that a lot of people walk into my office with no fertility problem, but other things that they may need help for, whether it's a genetic issue they're struggling with, a medical problem they're trying to get ahead of, or maybe they want to preserve their fertility because they haven't figured it all out, or maybe they separated from a partner and need a new plan for the second phase of their life. There's just a lot else that can happen. And it's why I love these sessions, because it's an opportunity to keep the conversation going,
Mhm.
and hear more than what is traditional.
Amazing. And with the increase in awareness of this topic and with, platforms like Conceive and other organizations that are doing the good work of spreading awareness and the information and getting it to the right folks, do you think that the stigma is changing or shifting at all? Do you think that there's better information that's being shared? Is there still a lot of like bad information or, maybe dated knowledge that's being shared? How are you seeing that over the last couple
Yes to all of the above.
of
um, you know, I do think that the stigma is reducing. I think that the more people talk, the more people normalize this conversation, the more people are, realizing that this is not, a scarlet letter. To have infertility is not the end of the world. There are solutions now that didn't exist before. And I think being open is an amazing, beautiful thing. I think a big problem we have is dissemination of information that is valid and true and that can guide people. I mean, it's impossible to find an answer that's so specific to you on the internet. But could there be more better general information? Yes. And this is why I'm so proud of what Lauren has created at Conceive and why I was so drawn to it. Because Conceive creates well curated, evidence based documents about what is the fertility experience, what are the treatments, what are some common questions that come up, and it's all you know it's all valid, and it is also very written in terms that are easy to understand, not full of medical jargon and, wrapped up in layers of things that need to be translated. So I think the accessibility she's created for people, and also the support and the community that she's built around it to decrease that stigma, has made huge waves in an area that we still need to make more progress, but it is making a difference. And that's what this kind of session is all about too.
Awesome. And I'd love to go over the common fertility treatments and approaches. But before that, you mentioned being at various points of the journey, whether it's you're wanting to, have your first child, your second child, go beyond that. What are you seeing more people come to you for fertility preservation and even starting before that, thought of that first child? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, where there's been a huge uptick in fertility preservation. Some of it has to do with access. Some of it has to do with the fact that people are delaying their childbearing. Some of it has to do with increased benefits for it, and just knowledge. I think that is the power of information is people didn't know that they even had this option and that it could be so effective. But I am seeing a lot of people who are coming not just for egg freezing, which I think is what people most commonly talk about, because it's more of the sort of independent option where if you freeze your eggs, they're purely yours and you can do whatever you want with them in the future, but also embryo banking. And that could be either before any fertility planning has started, and that's like the first step in your plan. It could be after you've already had a kid and maybe you're realizing you need more time, or maybe you had some difficulty and you want to plan for a subsequent child. So there's a lot of different ways that fertility preservation can come into play, and I can talk a little bit about what that means. But I'm also seeing all comers for all things still as frequently, but we've seen a lot more fertility preservation. But I still am doing a lot of inseminations and mild treatments as well as IVF for people who are already in the sort of infertility struggle.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Lauren, Logan, I'd love to pivot to you guys and hear a little bit about your story, your journey, how you came to building Conceive, and go from there.
Sure. So much of what Taranae said, it was just like exactly the insights we had. So, I'll just say, and I'll get personal because I know no other way. But when we were trying, I was in this weird kind of like sandwich in my life where when I was 30, I had gotten a divorce and moved from New York to San Francisco. And so all of my New York friends just happened to be in their 20s with kids. And then all of my San Francisco friends were single. And so when we started trying and were having trouble, I literally felt like, well, no one gets it. Because like all my friends in their 20s probably had no problems. At least they hadn't shared anything with me.
Sure.
And they were in their 20s, which is also, can be a benefit. It's not a sure
Mhm.
thing though. And then all of my single friends in San Francisco, I was like, well, they won't know either. And then, of course, I'm not good at keeping my mouth shut. So, like, I started talking about what was going on with me. And I realized, and this was back in 2018. So, it was a little bit of a different time. Um, I think we've made a lot of strides since then. It's still not perfect when we talk about kind of breaking the stigma. We still have a ways to go, but we're getting there. It was like the floodgates opened. I heard from friends and strangers and people I hadn't spoken to in decades reaching out and being like, oh my God, Lauren, your story sounds like mine. Can we talk about it? And what happens is we're kind of forced to form these underground networks, these sort of informal like mentorships, I call them. That, part of that was the inspiration for the coaching model at Conceive, where we kind of lean on each other. And I was talking to Logan's friend from college's wife, who I had never met. And Dustin was like my savior because unfortunately she had 4 miscarriages, but then had 2 kids. And so I was like, well, tell me what worked for you. And so one of the things I realized was like, when it came to feeling alone, I would seek out those groups, Facebook groups, Reddit forums, there are lots and lots and lots of forums if you want them. But
Mhm.
I never felt personally connected and safe because there was no curation. And so now I'm 42 and live in New York, and I can go on there and be connected with a 22-year-old in Alabama, and we have nothing in common, right? And what's more is what Taranay hit on, which is like, it's such a personalized journey. And the more I leaned into and learned about other people's journeys, the more I realized that like what worked for Dustin wasn't necessarily going to work for me, but it could be some trial and error. And so it was a combination of sort of like people just wanting to be seen and heard, right? Understanding that these journeys were so specific and personalized, that there is a lot of snake oil out there, people trying to benefit off of the pain and charging. I just saw something the other day, it was like $300 tea to get you pregnant. I wish. And
Right.
so I knew whatever we built had to be grounded and kind of in evidence and highly personalized and connective, because those were some of the things that we were facing. And for us, we had resources at our disposal, which I was super grateful for, because financially in this country, you also treat this as elective, like Botox.
Right.
60% of people have coverage, but I think 40% don't. And as like big tech companies and more self-insured employers are signing on and saying this is important to us because they know they can better retain talent, that's great. And yet there are many that talking about IVF is completely inaccessible, the average cost being $60K for success. And so that was like, kind of one piece, leaving people behind. But we went to a bunch of specialists. We did the IUI. We talked about IVF, and we had a miscarriage after a year and a half of trying. And we had been so excited, right, when we got pregnant that time. And we had no thinking or understanding of it going awry. And we wound up actually resisting and dropping out of the system. And when I say that, I mean, we kept trying on our own because we had a couple of doctors, one in particular, who basically said, like, you should do IVF. And whereas we could have probably figured it out, and we eventually did it the second time around, and I can talk about that, we didn't understand the why behind it.
Yeah.
He didn't spend the time to just say like things such as, hey, Lauren, we know nothing about egg quality. We know a lot more about embryo quality. If we make embryos for you, we can give you a better shot at success. And by the way, if you want more than one child, even though you're in your mid-30s, I was in my mid-30s at the time, you may want to plan ahead. And so that was really our experience. So we wound up having Elle. She's now 5. She just turned 5 last week. And it was without intervention, so to speak, even though we had tried IUI and things like that. And then we did IVF second time around.
Logan, anything to add before I?
No, I think that's pretty complete.
Okay. I just didn't want to gloss over you. You mentioned IUI and IVF. I would love, Tarana, for you to just, give a brief overview of the different treatments and what one might consider as, their options and, what are the
Absolutely.
different.
I usually like to sort of put it in 2 buckets, IUI and IVF. There's a bunch of other stuff in between, softer things, more other, higher technology things, et cetera. But I think that's like the perfect overview of the two. So IUI stands for intrauterine insemination. It's a method of placing washed sperm at the top of the uterus, and it's usually timed very accurately with the cycle so that it's right at the time of ovulation or right before ovulation is deemed to occur. The value add of an IUI is that you are getting the maximum sperm that has the most function as close to the ovulating egg as possible, and hopefully at the right time, rather than losing sperm through intercourse in the vagina, the cervix, the uterus as it travels up. It's also a great opportunity for people who are using donor sperm and might not have access to sperm otherwise. And so what's nice about it is it's a very gentle treatment. It's usually done in the office. It's not always that it needs to be combined with other things, but it can be. And when I say that, it means that we can combine an IUI with somebody's natural ovulation and their natural cycle timing, or it can be combined with medications for the female partner that can sometimes boost up the ovulation. We call it super ovulation with Clomid or letrozole. It's an oral medication that can help you to ovulate more than one egg. And that also has value in sort of, if you think about stacking the decks per month, getting more than one egg out helps to give more than one opportunity for success in the month in what is a very inefficient process, which is for, reproduction. We learn in like health class that it's like so easy. If you look at somebody, you're going to get pregnant. It's not the case at all. We're looking at success rates for natural fertility for somebody who's just trying for the first time, max 20% per month. I mean, it's highly inefficient.
And you're 20, right?
It's terrible. I mean, like, I can't even, if I told you that were your odds in anything else, you would be looking for alternatives.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is it is a fairly gentle treatment because there aren't like any big procedures. The IUI itself is not painful. It's not under anesthesia. There's no needles involved. Maybe just involves a little bit of cramping. And it's something that you can go about your routine day afterwards with no major restrictions. The alternative to doing that, like I said, the other category is IVF. And IVF is an umbrella term that encompasses multiple different things. That encompasses egg freezing, embryo banking, IVF, like creation of embryos, and then also embryo transfer. So the way I like to split it is into two phases. IVF starts with embryo creation, and then it hopefully ends with an embryo transfer. The embryo creation part can be sectioned off in just egg freezing. So it's the same process no matter what you do. You go through a 2-week process of taking injectable hormones. At the end of a 2-week process, you'll have an egg retrieval. At that moment is when we start getting to phase 1, 2, and 3. So phase 1 would be you could just freeze your eggs as they are at the retrieval. Phase 2 is inseminating eggs in multiple different fashions to create an embryo. Embryos can get tested. I think that's what Lauren was alluding to before when she's talking about IVF and planning and whatnot, that you can do genetic screening of embryos, whether that's for just their regular composition, like female male chromosomes like 46XY, 46XX, or for a targeted genetic condition you may have. Those can be frozen, just like eggs can be frozen and preserved indefinitely, or you can then opt to use them to go into phase 2, which is a transfer of an embryo into the uterus after the uterus has been prepared for transfer. I think going back to debunking things that people don't understand about IVF is that the creation of embryos process takes 2 weeks to do. As the patient going through the experience, it's not several months, but the overarching process can take several months.
Yeah.
That you may have to do more than one cycle of creating eggs and embryos. You may need to try more than once to get pregnant with an embryo transfer. I told you about natural fertility and the odds of success there. Well, IVF overcomes a lot of obstacles, but it's still not perfect. We can never be perfect, as much as I'd like to pretend we can be. And our peak success rate through IVF with our best embryo created, no matter when it was created, is about 65, 70% implantation potential. So it's still not perfect. But I usually say persistence pays off. And also, depending on how you're responding to IVF and all of that, you'll have a lot of touch points with your doctor. But I hope that's sort of the broad strokes overview of treatments. Like I said, there's a lot of things in between and above what I've talked about, but I think that's probably
Is
enough.
there any particular reason you would encourage someone to go into IUI before IVF, or does it not have to proceed? One does not have to precede the other.
It's kind of a joint decision. I'll answer it in the reverse, which is there are certain conditions that necessitate IVF. If your tubes are blocked, you don't have a conduit path to get pregnant via IUI. If you have a very severe male factor infertility, meaning that there's just like a very small amount of sperm that no matter what you do will not access the egg without the one-to-one direct insemination we can do through IVF. And then again, I mentioned before that if you have a genetic condition that you want to screen for, well, IVF can be your pathway to do it. And additional bonuses is preserving fertility.
Yeah.
So I think Lauren mentioned this before. If upfront you want to have 2 to 4 children, depending on your age, depending on your plan, etc. Some people use it as a strategic thing to do rather than jump to the IUI first. They might do IVF, set it and forget it, and then go back and do an insemination, or just plan to do IVF all the way or whatever, because it makes sense for the global plan. IUIs can be fantastic for somebody who maybe isn't a great candidate for IVF because of egg quantity, medical conditions, needle phobias, or maybe just wants a more natural approach. Or somebody who maybe doesn't ovulate. I think somebody had asked something in the chat about PCOS and fertility.
Yeah.
Some people with PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome don't ovulate regularly, so they haven't had a chance to even try. And IUIs or using medicated IUIs can be a really nice way of introducing that person to fertility treatment without going so aggressive and unnecessary. So
Right.
like I said, it's a conversation. It's not one size fits all, and depends on your certain circumstance.
And the only thing I would add to that is that there's a third scenario in which your insurance company may not cover IVF until you do a number of IUIs, which is the
Yeah.
least fun and the worst about kind of incentives in healthcare. I think some of that is really outdated and is starting to be done away with, but we had a member who had to do 6 IUIs before she went on to IVF, and she was already 41. It was really challenging because there was a lot of time wasted, but she did get pregnant and she has a baby boy.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah.
No, you're completely right. There's a lot of insurance like mandates, but it is becoming less that
Getting
you
better.
must fill this category in order to do that. They're fixing that a little bit, but there's just so many insurance restrictions, and cost is a big barrier to IVF for most people. I think I usually say if IVF were free and egg freezing were free, this would just be like
No-brainer. Yeah.
yeah, people would be doing so much more of it. There's still a lot of people who aren't keen on it, but the financial piece is important.
Since we're on the
Thanks for saying
topic,
that, Lauren. I don't know why I didn't even mention
Of
it.
course.
You got my back.
So
since
well.
we're on the topic, if IVF isn't covered by insurance, are there other pathways for people?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Obviously at the end of the day, if it's something you need, there are financing programs. There are ways of figuring out how to make IVF happen, but it is expensive. And we're not talking about a few $100s, we're talking about a few $1,000s, several $1,000s.
Tons of thousands.
But IUIs are a great alternative if you are in that category where you just feel like it's not even financially feasible. Even medicated cycles without IUI is an option. Natural cycle monitoring. There are other things, but it all comes down to what your medical needs are.
Sure.
And just to add to that, I know mental health is like a big topic of conversation around fertility. Financial health and challenges with finances kind of they play on each other, right? One begets the other. And like the reality is that with 60% or 40% of people not covered for these treatments in the US, there's a lot of pain, right? Because the average IVF cycle for success is usually on average $60,000. So one of the offerings we have at Conceive, in addition to what I mentioned, is financial coaching. And what that entails is really someone who will sit with you. And if you have insurance benefits, make sure you're taking advantage of them in the right way, fight back on denied claims, which is often just really hard to figure out how to do that. But if you don't, sit with you and figure out what grant and loan programs you could have access to. And there are newer, exciting models that are looking at ways to, you don't pay unless you get a baby. It's, not for everyone and not in every state and not in every clinic, but there are newer, exciting companies coming in to change the dynamic to actual, results based.
And yeah, and I've seen patients that, their company didn't offer benefits, they go back and they champion it, and it happens. They say my competitor group offers this, why don't I just go down the street
Totally.
and get a job there?
I tried to do that once. It didn't work.
It sounds exhausting, but it is doable, and you can be an advocate in your own workplace to try and help.
Totally.
And sometimes benefits are outside of insurance. There are other third-party programs. There's a lot of things happening in this space. And it is improving, but we still have a long way to go.
On that topic of support, Lauren, do you see people coming to Conceive at the start of their journey, midway point? How did you see the platform, in terms of levels of support, and at what part of the journey, and how do you think it's being accessed now?
Yeah. So we cover everything from preconception through pregnancy and even starting to build into postpartum. But what was so interesting is we started squarely in kind of fertility and infertility. And I imagined that the only people that would come to us were people who are like really struggling, who are at some kind of crossroads, whether they've been trying for longer than they felt they should have. I mean, high school sex ed really set us up for failure here. I truly thought I could blink and get pregnant. And it turns out some people can, not us. Um, and so I imagined that it would be folks who were maybe had a failure, had a loss, have been trying for longer than they expected, et cetera. When in reality, when we first launched the digital program, our first member she'd just gotten married. And she's like, what do I do? Because no one really learned how to get pregnant either. It wasn't until my mid-30s that I learned things about my cycle and ovulation and cervical mucus changes and basal body temperature changes and all of these things that are like markers for our overall health.
Yep.
Now, and don't even get me started on like men's fertility, right? And what Taryn said at the beginning is one of the biggest things and parts of who we are at Conceive, which is infertility is actually a health issue. It affects men and women at equal rates, truly, by the numbers.
Yep.
And yet we've thought of it for eons as a women's health issue for a million reasons, right? The stigma and shame around men's infertility, the tendency to blame women, and then the infrastructure we built around it really kind of perpetuates those notions because, fertility apps tended to only look at the woman's cycle and never said like, hey, by the way, it's cheap, easy, and pleasurable for a man to get tested. Truly. I say this all the time. It's the first thing you should do if you're trying to conceive because it's ejaculating. It's, can be anywhere from $100 or covered by insurance to maybe $200. You can do it in the comfort of your home, or you can even kind of drop off at a clinic. There's sort of a variety of ways. I know it's probably not the most exciting thing to do, but it really is cheap, easy, and pleasurable. And so that's like really a critical place to start to also balance out the playing field.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see this journey impacting relationships? And Logan, I'd love to hear your point of view on, how you felt, what you thought you felt your role was as you were going through your own journey, and what piece of advice you would share to other, men in the situation who are really just trying to support their partners in the best way.
Yeah, obviously, I think it's not a one size fits all answer, but I think the word that you use, supportive, is the core of it, right? I mean, to figure out a way to find out what's going on for your partner, and do your best to support them, right? I think, I don't know, the word fertility and the word infertility for me, they don't conceptually make a lot of sense, right? Because infertility, in a common definition, would mean that you cannot get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And fertility, obviously, would be the opposite of that. But what we're dealing with is expectations, right? Like, what are we expecting out of an experience, and how are we expecting ourselves and our partners and our life to progress? So, listen, I think we've all had some bumps in the road where things have not gone as expected in our lives. And I think this is part and parcel to that, right? This is about being human. This is about living a life and finding a way to support each other in whatever's going on, right? So in the same way that you would support each other if you stubbed your toe, right? And like, we're like trying to help your partner through that. Again, probably a little bit flippant in that. But I do think that the answer is in being, kind of empathetic about it, understanding, kind of trying to understand as best you can what they're feeling, and working through the feelings, I mean, the despair to a certain extent, especially when people are trying to do something they really, really, really want to do, and it's not happening for them, right? I think we can all understand what that feels like.
Yeah.
And I think taking that feeling inside and applying it to this situation, which is, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, probably the number one once you start in on the process, right? Understand this is the thing that you want the most in your life. And it's your expectations are that it was supposed to happen 6 months ago and it hasn't happened for you. I think there's an easy way to find something within yourself that is representative of something you've been through that you can help that other person with, and be, again, going back to the word supportive, in whatever way, shape, or form, helps your partner. I think it's, again, I wish it was a cup of tea and, a hot biscuit was the answer, but unfortunately nothing is so simple in life.
And I'll just say maybe two things on top of that, which is like anything, it comes down to communication and like knowing what your partner wants in that moment. There's like a great framework for this, but it's like, do you want me to help solve your problem? Do you want to just let me vent? Like, do you want to just vent? Do you want to hug? Right? Like, what do you need right now is just like a key general like life advice for partners and relationships. But I think a lot of it is like, I'll say like almost two flip side things. Like, one is, as I was like, sort of going on my rant about how infertility is not just a women's health issue. And so the burden shouldn't just be on the woman. And I was like, torturing myself and, feeling like I was contributing to something. When in reality, like we have no fucking clue, to be honest, what was wrong with us. We just don't make babies easily. But on the flip side, it's like a lot of it is like also checking in with each other, because I think that I had so much shame and pain and anxiety and despair and all the things that Logan mentioned, but so did he. And to this day, right, we have experiences that trigger us and we look at each other, and it's like my tendency is to be like, oh, I'm so upset, Logan. But I'm like, how are you doing? Like birth announcements and things like that. Like, I'm like, well, how do you feel about that too? Right. And we both feel, and we may feel different things, but we're both feeling something. And so it's connective in that way too. It seems obvious, but it's also like there's this tendency to be like, well, it's it's me, it's about me. And so we talk through that, and it really helps.
It's exactly right. And I think, something came up in a conversation not too long ago that I was a part of that was really helpful for me to sort of think about. And that is, if you're one half of a couple, you assume that the experience is shared and you're going through one collective experience. But in fact, you're each going through your own experience within an experience. And it was really clarifying for me to hear that articulated in that way, because you get clouded by your own experience and you just assume that, your partner's feeling the same exact way and experiencing the exact same way, but they're not.
Right. We had an experience where we just, with our miscarriage, I think we just experienced it so differently, and that wasn't a bad thing. We both had so much pain around it, but I did realize like we weren't seeing it the same way, and that was like
Totally.
okay. And so I looked for other outlets where where folks who had been, so it just and I have the best partner. So like truly, there's like, I'm not just saying that because he's here. But
It would
like,
be okay if you were.
but Quinn, you said it so well. It's like we don't experience it the same way, and so and that's okay. And like at least acknowledging that and getting that out in the open really helps.
And two, the experience can make you feel so powerless. And I think that's what's amazing about a platform like Conceive, right? You're putting the information into the hands of the people at the right moment when they need it. And so it's that like form of empowerment. And, kind of um, taking away some of the confusion that is so often experienced. And, again, every person's situation is unique. And so there's varying levels of confusion. And I think I was so impressed too to learn about your success rate. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what people can expect when they come to Conceive?
Yeah. We are always measuring impact around outcomes because I don't know if it's common sense, but there's also data to suggest that people who feel more supported feel less stressed and more optimistic, you know, likely many things in their lives will get better, and feel connected and not alone, right? We all know we're kind of facing a loneliness epidemic. And so we've been able to change outcomes for almost half of our members. We have a 3x higher pregnancy rate for our premium members than our plus members, which that's a lot of like words, but essentially what that means is members who have community and get one-on-ones with our coaches and nurses, those are premium members, they tend to get pregnant faster. Our plus members just have access to our text message support. So it's a different level of support. There's no community, there's no one-on-ones, but still value add. And we've been able to improve anxiety levels or reducing anxiety levels by over 95% for our members, which is sort of
Amazing.
astounding. Improve gratitude and optimism and all of that. And a lot of it, I think, goes back to the themes we're talking about, which is, I think the biggest challenge for me is I let this take over my life. And I let this take over my life for a very long time because as much as we only have one child, we continued again after having her. And probably 7 years, we're just obsessing over this thing, right? Everything I put in my body, how I moved my body. I literally remember being on an amazing group trip to celebrate Logan's and his best friend's 40th birthday in Italy. And I wasn't drinking wine or having cured meats, which like, that's taking it too far, to be clear, in the 2-week wait. Like, I was out of my mind. And I remember I thought I was pregnant. For some reason, I was convinced. And luckily, because it was going to happen anyway, I got my period early. And so I stopped that nonsense and I enjoyed Italy in the way I had. So there's like a few frameworks we like to share that I think are really tactical in case it's helpful to anybody that we build into our curriculum and the one-on-ones we do. So it's like the 2-week wait is the hardest part, right? You may be pregnant, you may not be pregnant. You don't want to act like you are because you don't want to get attached, but it's like purgatory. It's fucking hell. So it's like, do something every day that grounds you. The thing could be as simple as getting your favorite dessert from your favorite cafe or your favorite coffee to having a date with a friend. Something concrete that's not work and not fertility. Otherwise, you're just consumed by it, right? And you can be spiraling all day. I think there's one that's like not really great advice from a doctor's perspective. So this isn't one we give to our members necessarily, but it's like, and hear me out. Hear me out. It's don't act
I
like
was like all in
I know,
on
there's
this
a
though.
doctor
I
on the
thought it was
line.
fantastic.
No,
Like
so
dessert, coffee, friends, like fun. What
now
else?
it's wild.
Exercise
No.
class, like sounds great.
No, it's just don't act like you're pregnant until you're pregnant. Now, there
Yes,
are
I tell my patients that all the time
okay.
though.
There are
But
boundaries
there
with
is a
this.
lot of debate among
There's
doctors
a
about
lot of
that.
debate.
A
I
lot of
think
debate. So it's like very much not the like golden rule, but it
totally.
like you're saying, it is torture if you
It's
are trying
torture
for years
for a
and
year,
every month you can only
2 years.
have fun for 2 weeks. What the hell
Oh
is
my
that?
God.
Yeah.
That's not a
Yeah.
life.
Right.
No.
And you are going to
Especially
end up
after
once you are
time.
pregnant being on restriction for like another year.
And that's
Yep.
exactly. So I think there's a balance, and we're
That's
very
your whole youth.
personalized with giving that advice. And if your doctor is saying post IVF, you need to obey pregnancy restrictions in the 2-week wait, totally get that and would never say otherwise. But I think if you're trying on your own for a long period of time, like me in Italy, like don't do that. Like, if you want to have a glass of wine, have the glass of wine until you know you're pregnant. And then setting boundaries, because we find that things like setting boundaries sound really fluffy. So we don't like saying that. We get more tactical with this stuff. So that's just like a few different ideas. I think the last thing that Logan and I probably didn't do, but that we talk a lot about with our members is like continue living your life to the fullest. Well, sorry, that's not true that we didn't do it, but like having these date nights that are different, right? Like trying to, create, novelty in your relationships, whether it's with your partner or with your friends, like continuing those things and doing the things that are important to you, but also giving space to knowing if certain things are no longer important to you, you've changed. Maybe you don't want to do HIIT because exercises, because somebody told you you shouldn't. I don't think that's necessarily true, but if you feel like you want to pick up yoga instead, go for it. Whatever the case may be for you. I think that having some flexibility there is important.
It's
I think
like
what you're saying though is like mental framework.
yes.
And then you have to personalize it once you get there. But I
Totally.
don't think people realize how much emotional Kevlar you need to get through all of this, and that you might not have ever thought about your mental health until you're deep into this, and then it's like, I don't have the tools to adjust. And
Yeah.
so I think Conceive really creates that
Yeah.
toolbox for you to figure out what works for you. And I know not all doctors do this, but it's like there's a sensitivity chip that some are missing and some have, to understand that some people do need breaks, and there does need to be an understanding that not everybody can just like bulldoze through months and months and months of this stuff, because it seems like no big deal. I said it's 2 weeks, so what? But then there's the waiting, and then there's the results, and then there's planning another thing, and then there's the insurance and the bills. And
Or if you're like me, even the priming with estrogen patches made me feel insane. So like I'm really out there.
people respond very differently to hormones, and then everybody takes it to a different level of seriousness, like the commitment that you had in Italy, versus like imagine just all the time being like that for years. It's a lot. So I'm glad that this conversation is happening.
Yeah, for sure. Can we spend a little bit more time on the mental health aspect and, from both of your observations, is there anything you can share with the group around what one might expect in terms of the impact to mental health as they're going through this? And then I want to sort of follow that up with a question from the chat, which is, how can one best support a friend of theirs who might be going through this from a mental health standpoint?
Do you want me to start, or you want to start?
You start.
I'll go from the more technical side, which is that hormones mess with your moods, and everybody reacts differently to hormones. And a lot of what I do is give people hormones. And whatever you already were carrying on your heart and on your brain before you even start all of this can get accentuated by it. So I always, fair warning to anybody who's embarking on any fertility treatment, say that you won't really know until you do it, but that it is very common that if you are somebody who has some underlying anxiety or, depression or tendency to be very sensitive when you're PMSing or whatever, that it might be a real hardship for you as you're going through a cycle, and that it ebbs and flows. Some people feel great while they're taking the hormones. They get a high, they say, and then afterwards they crash, or they feel super moody and sensitive over everything. I've had patients tell me that I was crying over how we were going to cook the broccoli tonight. I have no idea why, but like I just burst into tears over broccoli. It's like, and that wears down everyone, not just the patient, but like their partner, their friends, their community, whatever. So I'd say on the short term, that is to be expected. And so it's really important to create space for yourself from things that you know are going to be triggering, create happiness where you know you can get it, to maybe mitigate some of it. But also to know that if this is going to go on for months, which there's no such thing as just like one and done, like not no such thing, but it's very rare that in 1 month it's all over, that you kind of plan for that. And then I do think there is a lot of stress and anxiety around logistics with all of this. It's very hard to, like, you can work while you do a lot of treatments and everything, but it's an added thing every day that you're worrying about and thinking about. It's an added trip to the doctor's office multiple times in the month. And there's the financial stress of it. And then also, like, it is hard to have a life. You feel like I can't travel all the time. I can't say yes to every bachelorette party. I can't, I can't be too far from the clinic at this time of the month or whatever. I don't know. So you can imagine over time what that does to your mental health, your sanity, your relationship, everything. And then we have like pretty well documented evidence, that shows that there is a much higher rate of mental health diagnoses and things as people go through fertility journeys. But I'll let Lauren go from
Yeah. That you touched on so many good points, Darnay. I think a lot about those logistics. Another thing you wouldn't want me to say necessarily, but like, one of our head coaches, I, I can't even explain her journey. It would never do it justice. She's written a lot about it. Holly Schechter, she's incredible. She's like a fertility whisperer, and she's just like, you feel like you're being hugged every time you talk to her, which is actually one of our goals with Conceive.
very accurate.
But she talks about the logistics and how at one point on her like 10th cycle, for I think for egg retrievals or maybe
Full
embryo.
disclosure, also not normal. So don't
Yeah.
10 cycles of anything
That is a
is
very
a lot.
rare. Yes, she
Yeah.
does have 3 kids, so there
She was a unique bird, yes.
she said, no, I'm not coming in at 6 a.m. And she said, you need to flex your schedule for like the blood draw and the ultrasound for me, because I can't do that. So there's boundaries in all different directions that you can try to set. Now, not every doctor's clinic will abstain, it will adhere to those. But I kind of love also kind of thinking about how you can advocate for yourself in those ways, because you're right? This literally affects every aspect of your life. I think back to, I was working in 2 different jobs when we were trying to get pregnant. And we finally got pregnant only a few months into a new job, but I had been trying for over 2 years.
Right.
And so I was terrified that they were going to think I went there to just get maternity leave and leave. And little did they know this was sort of the bane of my existence and had been like tormenting me for years, loss, all the things. And I remember vividly being in meetings where, pregnant women were kind of taken off of projects. And I was like, I don't want that to be me. And I felt so terrified to tell them that I was pregnant. So there's all of those things. And then when you have loss, you can't really mourn it. There's a lot of, you can't mourn it openly at work. I mean, because then your boss may know you're trying to get pregnant. So there's a lot of facets here. And I would say there's a few things to think about. One is get the support that you need and set the boundaries that you don't. I hate saying setting boundaries because it sounds so, like, of course, but it's like, if friends and family are triggering you, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to mute people on social media or go off social media if you're willing to do that. It's okay to find a therapist. Maybe it's your first time seeking out therapy. Maybe it's not. I went back into therapy during this time, and it was like the biggest reason why. And try and be clear about what you need. And I love the question that someone asked about, like, how can you be there for a friend going through this? It's so hard, but I think it's just about listening. And it's like, ask them what they need. Do they want you to check in? Do they want you to not check in? Because does that trigger them every time?
Right.
How can you support them and maybe saying no to the baby shower or to the tricky gender reveal? It's okay to say no to things. You have to protect yourself. And we also offer support. So we're here for you.
One thing too that I learned in my own journey was I was never afraid to share aspects of, my journey with my friends, whether in person or on social media. And it always surprised me the number of people that sort of responded to what I was sharing
Right?
without me knowing that they had been, going through that, thinking about it, wherever they were along their journey, and just saying, thank you for being open about it.
Yes.
And in fact, like it's, not that I inspired, but just that like
Of course you
sharing of
did, though.
information, also inspired a friend of mine who had been going through this journey to like be over, just sharing to the extent that she documented everything, created a video, invited everyone to like the video viewing. Like she, that was her way of getting through it. And she, sort of took cues from those around her who were sharing in the ways that were comfortable to them. And she found her own way to express that. And, that is obviously a very specific example and not, an example that many people would do themselves because maybe they're not like, open about it or content creators in a way. But, there's such variances in the way that people want to share this information. And I think if you are comfortable with being open as you want to be, I think I would encourage it because you never know who's listening. You never know who it might help. I certainly didn't expect it. I was just, posting my normal cadences of my life. And, it was really surprising, those that came forward and said that it was actually helpful.
I
I
think that's
love,
also true in the one-on-one scenarios too, where, I
Yeah.
mean, just in chatting with people, like you have no idea, again, about that, kind of expectations, as you talk to people about these things, you realize that almost everyone has gone through something.
yeah.
It's not obvious in the world in the way that people present themselves or whatever, but social media is a devil like that.
Yes.
So, if you don't feel open, I mean, certainly if you don't feel open in a larger format, I think, sharing your feelings and what's going on with friends, you're going to find a lot of people have the same stories and it just has been hidden or obscured or not talked about for whatever reason, especially men. I mean, like, I can't even tell you how many conversations I've had where I've shared about us and about what Lauren's building with Conceive, and then people are like, oh my God, like we had so many problems, or yeah, I mean, it brings out a lot of conversation, and I think people are always, I think they're actually happy to share it because they don't have, and I think men even maybe a little bit more so than women don't have those avenues to be open and to share these kind of things with anybody else. And so when those
True.
avenues do open, they're thankful for them and you can have a really good conversation about it. And I think everyone walks away feeling a lot better. So there's value there.
Your story is someone else's survival guide. I mean, it's really true. And to Logan's point, it doesn't matter in what forum. You don't have to scream from the rooftops, but those one-on-one conversations can be all that it, like so meaningful.
Totally. Awesome. We have a couple minutes left, and I do want to get to a couple of questions that were posted in the chat. So first is, will Conceive be available through HSA, FSA payments?
Love that question. We're working on it. We also, in addition to selling direct to consumer, we actually sell through fertility clinics. So you'll start to see that you will get this support at eventually or soon at clinics like RMA of New York and many, many more. So we're actively working on that because we kind of really shift the burden a bit off of the clinician's shoulders and then create a much better patient experience. So we're super excited about those partnerships to come. But thank you for that question. And we'll keep you, we can keep you updated if you reach out to me and when we're HSA, FSA available.
So, and then the last one, Tarana, is how common is infertility in women with PCOS?
PCOS is not created equal. So there are a lot of people with PCOS who have intact fertility. It hinges on whether or not you have regular menstrual cycles. So it's not like I can just put a number on it. But it is common for people with PCOS to have irregular cycles. And that is the only reason, really, not the only reason, but the main reason why they have infertility. And that's a very correctable thing, like with some of those oral medications I was mentioning before, letrozole and Clomid, things like that. But if somebody has PCOS and has regular menstrual cycles, it doesn't mean they're going to have infertility. I think there's a misconception that PCOS results in poor egg quality, and it's really not such not as impactful as what we see with like endometriosis or something like that. So I'm sorry I don't have like a specific stat, but it's relative to the symptoms associated with it.
Sure. Thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation. I really hope that those who have joined us, learned something and is able to, proceed in their journey. And we wish everyone, the best in terms of success rate and levels of support that they are seeking out, and just the best outcomes for all. We will be sharing this conversation within the Nanit community later on this week, so please check there. If you missed something, wanted to play it back or share it with someone who may not have been able to attend tonight, and I think if you just wait for one more minute, we'll wait to hear who the winner of the Sound and Light giveaway is, and we'll announce that here. If you also missed any of the other events that we have had during our Parent Like a Pro Summit, they're also posted on our YouTube channel. So follow us on YouTube as well as anywhere you can find us on social, Instagram, TikTok. And, we always sort of clip things out and play that back and make sure we get the message and the information out to as many people as possible. Thank you for joining our community. We can't do this without you. And, we continue to work really, really hard every single day to get this type of data-backed and expert-led information to as many people as possible. So thank you again. Thank you so much for attending, and we wish you well.
If anyone wants to try Conceive, feel free to use FF20 for 20% off your first 2 months.
Thank you. We'll share that too in
Okay, perfect.
follow-up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Have a
Thanks,
nice
Lynn.
night.
Thanks,
Thank you
Nanit.
all. Have a good
Bye.
night.
Bye.